Guys, and welcome back to Gap Gracepoint Online. Today is episode 2 of our #followers series as we carry on and we have a look to see how the life of Jesus and the life of his followers model for us how we should be living as followers of Jesus in today's life. And so today we look at follow and care. So stick with me as today we look at the story of Jesus caring for a widow. Our story for today comes from Luke 7 verse 11 to 17. And we look at how Jesus stopped a funeral. In our story today, we really see a time where Jesus had compassion and took the time to care for someone. He and his disciples were in the countryside near a town called Nain, and suddenly they saw a great commotion happening in the streets of that town. There was a funeral procession that was happening, which means that people were walking with a coffin and the family of someone who had passed away. Imagine being in that crowd and trying to catch glimpses of the conversations that were happening to try and find out what happened and who died and how that person passed away. And so the disciples drew closer to the crowd to listen to some of the conversations. Imagine one of the conversations went, "That older woman walking around crying so hard, that must be the mother. Shame, that poor old lady. She first lost her husband and now her son. She's a widow and now she's lost her son as well." Some of the disciples must have thought, too bad that we only got here after the young man died. If we'd gotten here earlier, maybe Jesus would have been able to heal the young man before he died, heal him from his sickness. And so they thought there was no hope. But Jesus came close to the widow and he said to her, "Don't cry." Imagine the reaction of the crowd. Someone saying to someone who has just lost the person they really love to death, saying, "Don't cry." They must have thought Jesus was quite insensitive and didn't really care for this woman. But he said to her, "Don't cry," because he knew what was going to happen next. He went up to the coffin and placed his hand on it. Now that already in itself was a shocking thing to do, and it showed how much Jesus cared for this woman. You see, in their culture, if you touched something that had to do with death, you would be seen as unclean and you would not be able to go into the temple to worship God. And so Jesus risked himself being unclean just to touch this coffin. And then he also said, "Stand up." Stand up. Imagine how strange that must have sounded to someone who had passed away. Saying, "Stand up," to someone who was lying in a coffin dead. The crowd must have thought Jesus was really strange and had gone off his head. But Jesus knew what was going to happen. And so he said, "Stand up." Next thing, this man was alive. What a miracle. How crazy this moment must have been to anyone who was part of this crowd. At first, Jesus said, "Don't cry." Then he said, "Stand up." And suddenly this young man was alive again. No wonder he had said, "Don't cry," to the mom, because he knew that the young man was going to be alive again very soon. Everyone was astonished. Jesus had brought this young man back to life. What happened next was even cooler. This funeral procession that had been going about mourning this young man's death suddenly turned into a great celebration as they celebrated him coming back to life again. How amazing is that? From mourning into dancing and celebrating. The people came to praise God and said how wonderful God was for allowing Jesus to raise this man back to dead. They were all worshiping God for his mighty power through Jesus. In the same way, we are called to follow and care, just like Jesus did. As followers of Jesus today, we need to have the same care and compassion for other people as Jesus had for the widow and the young man that had died. Jesus had compassion and showed that to the woman by saying to her, "Don't cry," because he knew what he was going to do. In the same way, he showed the crowd that we should have compassion on other people when they are sad and when they are going through difficult times. And if we can, we should help them out. Jesus knew that he could show care and compassion to this family by healing the young man. But we maybe can't do that, or we could. But sometimes we can just show that person that we care by saying a kind word to them when they're going through something difficult. Treating others with compassion is a great way of following Jesus and showing care. By that, we show other people that we are followers of God and that this is how followers of God are supposed to live, by following God and caring. Our memory verse for today comes from 1 Peter 3 verse 8, and it says in the NIV, "Live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic. Love as brothers or sisters. Be compassionate and humble." That's it from us here today at Gap Gracepoint Online. Don't forget, in the comments below, there's a resource link for you to explore the lesson further today. Bye guys, see you next week.